Hey friends, it's Holly from Chic Antique and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making over this pine dresser. This is actually my client's piece, so I'm going to be painting it for them using their design for it, so I'm super excited for that. This is a used piece, so it's not in perfect condition, but it is functional and it looks pretty good. The person they purchased it from said they got it at Ashley Furniture about 10 years ago or so. So it's not vintage, it's not super old, but it is completely pine, so it is real wood. Pine is a soft wood, so it is pretty easy to ding, so you can see here there are some significant dings on the drawers, which I'll have to take care of. I really like the feet on this, I think they're super cute, and that little door, something about it is just super cute and I love it. Not only are we going to be painting the dresser, we're actually going to be keeping this original hardware and painting that as well. So everything we're going to be keeping and just giving it a refresh with paint. I'm going to start by first removing the hardware and then we can give this a good clean. It was fairly dusty inside, so I'm going to go ahead and vacuum the inside drawers and inside the dresser. After vacuuming everything, I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning. I'm going to use some gloves to protect my skin. I have one bucket with clean water that I'll be rinsing my rag out with, and then my other bucket I'm going to put TSP, so that is my cleaner and that is what I'm going to use to clean the dresser. So instead of getting my TSP all dirty after I've wiped down a section, I'm going to rinse out my rag in the clean water bucket. So as always, I'm going to be using this TSP cleaner all over this entire piece, the outside, the drawers, as well as the inside of the dresser as well. Here is what the water looked like. So my clean water is on the left side, that's where I rinsed my rag, and then on the right side, that is my TSP. And I do this because wiping down a piece with dirty TSP is basically pointless. Now I'm coming back with clean water and rinsing off that TSP so there's no residue. And then I let everything dry really well, and I came back and filled any damage with wood filler. You can see it's pretty extensive. And it just keeps going. After letting that wood filler dry, I came back with a 120 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to smooth out all of that wood filler. After sanding down the wood filler, I'm going to scuff sand the entire surface using 220 grit sandpaper. I always scuff sand because painting over a shiny surface is going to often cause adhesion problems. So I always like to scuff sand to prep the surface for paint and make sure that I'm going to have proper adhesion. After sanding, there's always a lot of dust left behind, so I always come back with a microfiber rag first, and then to get anything else that is remaining on the surface, I use a tack cloth. I'm going to be priming this piece today. I'll be using Zinsser Bullseye 123 primer. This is a water-based primer. It's going to help my paint adhere properly, and it's also going to block any stains in case some of the knots in the pine bleed through. I'm going to be applying this with a 4-inch nap roller, and any areas I can't reach with the roller, I'm going to use a chip brush. This primer does level out really well on its own, so I don't find that I get very many roller bumps using this. Sometimes I don't like to use a roller because it does leave that texture behind, but this primer, I don't have that issue. I'm going to do 2 coats of this primer to ensure maximum durability, adhesion, and stain blocking. After letting those 2 coats of primer dry, I'm going to come back the next day and start painting. I'm going to be using a new paint today. This is Melange paint in their one-step formula in the color Paperie White. I'm going to mix this really well because this is a one-step paint. It has a built-in primer, paint, and top coat built in. This paint is very interesting because it's super watery and super thin, so we're going to see how that works with the self-leveling claims that this paint has. So again, I'm going to be using a 4-inch nap roller for my first coat, as well as a chip brush to get in any areas that I can't reach with the roller. You can see compared to the primer here, how much warmer and creamy this color is. That primer is a very stark, bright white, and this paint color has a little bit more warmth to it and a little bit more creaminess, which I really like. It's not too bright, but it's not too yellow. It's very pretty. So I'll tell you a little bit about this paint. This is my first time trying Melange paints, and this is their one line. So this is their one-step all-in-one paint. It has a built-in primer in it. Unfortunately, the primer doesn't have any stain blocking properties, so if you're worried about stains, you will need to use a stain blocking primer. The primer that's in here helps with adhesion, so this paint does have really good adhesion, so that's awesome. Then it has the paint, obviously, and a satin clear coat built in as well. So it has 3 things built into this paint. They also claim that it has very good self-leveling properties, so we're gonna see how that works with this roller. I usually like to hand brush. I just find it more therapeutic and I just enjoy the process more when using a paintbrush. But I wanted to test out a roller with this paint since this is a new paint to me and I wanted to see how it performed. So that's why I'm using a roller here. A chip brush will usually add more texture than a synthetic brush, but you can see here how smooth it goes on with the chip brush, and I think that is due to the fact that this paint is super thin. It's super watery, and I think that's what helps with the self-leveling. I think that's why it smooths out so well, because it is such a thin paint. Moving on to the drawers, after I had done 2 coats of primer, I noticed a lot more dings than I previously saw with the factory finish. Sometimes it's easier to see dings after you've applied primer, and so that's what happened here. Once I got that white primer on there, I noticed a lot more dings and they were a lot more visible. So I really didn't like how those looked, so I decided to fill those in. And after my first coat of paint had dried, I also noticed more dings on the top of the dresser, so I went in and filled those in as well. So I let that wood filler dry and then sanded it smooth with 220 grit sandpaper. And now I'm coming in and painting the drawers. Another thing to note about this paint is they do recommend letting your paint dry for 2 to 4 hours before you can recoat it. So definitely keep that in mind if you're wanting to try this, because most chalk paints and mural paints usually dry within 1 hour and then you can recoat them. But all-in-one paints like this usually take longer to dry, especially if they have a self-leveling property. It levels out as it dries, so it does need longer time to dry. So that may make your project take longer, so I just wanted to mention that. After letting the paint dry, I'm coming back for my second coat and I'm going to be using a paintbrush for this so I can test it out. Since this paint is so thin, I'm dipping my brush in and then completely wiping off one side and the bottom to prevent it from dripping off my brush. So I only have paint on one side of the brush at all times. It's kind of hard to see because this is a white color and it's hard to see texture on white, but the roller did do a really good job. The paint smoothed out really well on its own, but I do prefer using a paintbrush, so I did want to test that out as well. In total, I did 3 coats of paint on everything, not only to get really full coverage since this is white, but I also wanted to do 3 coats because that's going to add more protection. I probably could have gotten away with doing just 2 coats, but doing that third coat is going to add more protection because the satin top coat is built in. Since this is a dresser, it is a high traffic area and it's going to get a lot of use. So I really thought that was important to get as much protection as possible. And I didn't film the third coat because painting white and any other color, honestly, does get pretty repetitive and boring after a while. So we're going to move on to the hardware. My client wanted to keep this, so we're going to be spraying it flat black. I'm going to be using Rust-Oleum's 2x Ultra Cover Paint and Primer. And with that being the final step, this project is now complete. So I just want to remind you what we started with, and then I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like now. Thank you so much for joining me on this makeover today. I hope you enjoyed it. I really love this modern farmhouse look that we created. I love the contrast of the white paint with the dark hardware. I think it's very pretty and very fresh. Just to give you my final thoughts on this paint, I really enjoyed using it. It's hard to have a solid opinion on a paint when you've only tried it one time. So I think I'm going to need to use it more to have a solid opinion on it. But I think the coverage is good. It did self-level really well. I really enjoyed that about this paint. It was pretty watery and a little bit different than what I'm used to, but I think that's why it levels out so well, because it's such a thin consistency. I think it works really great with a roller or a brush, so you can use it either way. I love that it has a built-in top coat, and I really like the satin finish. Not only does this save me time, but it does save me money, so I don't have to buy an additional top coat, so I think that's definitely a bonus with this paint. If you like this style of content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. That way you'll be notified every time I upload. And before you leave, please check out some of my other videos. I'll have my most recent upload linked in the eye above, as well as down below in the description. I thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you all next time. Bye! My 220 grit sandpaper, guys. Where's it? There is a fly, a tiny fruit fly in my finish. Why does this always happen? You would think years of evolution, bugs would not fly into wet surfaces. It's so annoying. This is why you have designated paint clothes, because even if you're careful, it will get on your clothes. So, nice. Oh, and there's more.